Artemis. Artemis is your prototypical nature goddess. She's a virgin huntress, and she spends all of her time in the woods. She also has associations with the moon, and probably at some point she was a fertility goddess. And there are a lot of associations in antiquity with her and certain aspects of fertility, especially childbirth and young humans and young animals. She often appears with the young in nature. Artemis is the daughter of Zeus and Leto and is the sister of Apollo. She was born on Mount Cynthus on the island of Delos, and therefore she's called Cynthia. According to most stories, she was born slightly before Apollo, and then she helped her mother bear Apollo, acting as midwife, which is another connection between Artemis and fertility. As I said, she's a virgin goddess, and she prefers the company of women. She really doesn't have too many men following her, although we'll see when we read the Hippolytus that there are men who follow her. Mostly, though, she's hanging out with women in nature, and she's also associated with childbirth, as I said. But if we're looking for signs, things to recognize her by, she carries a bow and arrow, so you'll see her. She's an archer goddess. But then notice the style of dress here. She has the short skirt, almost, you would say. I know it's not technically a skirt, but she keeps her clothing pulled up above her knees the way that a young girl would, and she wears sandals, and she's often depicted with animals. So if you see archer goddess with animals symbolizing nature, or archer goddess with her clothes pulled up above her knee, showing that she's young. So she always stays this goddess of youthfulness, of youthful innocence. There are a number of stories about Artemis, and I don't think any of them are really happy. The story of Niobe seems particularly sad, although once again it displays the common theme of hubris and nemesis. Before we talk about it, though, keep in mind that this is from Ovid, so he uses the Roman names Diana for Artemis and Latona for Leto. Apollo is just Apollo, although sometimes authors do call him Phoebus. In any event, Niobe was a queen of Thebes, and for some reason that doesn't really make sense, she got angry that the people were going to pay honor to Latona and her two children. Niobe thought that Latona was kind of a nobody god and only had two children, while Niobe herself was an actual queen, descended of gods and titans, and had a bunch of children. If anything, the people should be celebrating her. Big mistake. Latona heard about Niobe's complaints and sent her children, Apollo and Diana, down to kill all of Niobe's kids. In a horrifying scene, they slaughter her children one after the other, Apollo killing the boys and Diana killing the girls, until Niobe is begging for just one child to be left alive. The merciless gods kill the last child and leave her in her brokenness. Niobe, left with nothing, ceases to live immortal life and transforms into a stone. The gods move her to a mountaintop in Phrygia, where, the story is, she still sheds tears for all that she lost. The story of Actaeon is much better. One day, a young man named Actaeon was hunting in the woods with his dogs when he accidentally happened upon a pond where Diana and her attendants were bathing. Diana doesn't seem to like men much anyway. Being a virgin goddess, she could in no way tolerate a man seeing her naked. Now, although it was purely an accident, and Actaeon was really sorry, Diana was still angry. So to punish him, she turned him into a deer, and his dogs immediately chased him down and killed him. The justice of the gods isn't always easy for humans to understand. The story of Callisto and Arcas seems particularly unjust, especially to a modern audience. Callisto was one of the young women who attended Diana, but being a beautiful young maiden, obviously, she attracted the attention of Jupiter. He came down in the form of Diana herself and engaged the girl in conversation before kissing her, and then taking her in his arms and revealing his true form before raping her. After the crime, he ascended again into the heavens, but Callisto returned to Artemis, ashamed that she had been violated and was no longer a virgin. After a few months, Diana noticed that she was pregnant and cast her out of the group for having engaged in sexuality. So, abandoned and alone, she bore the child and named him Arcas. And it was at this point that Juno took her opportunity for revenge. She turned Callisto into a bear, but left the child as a human, so mother and child could never know each other. Callisto wandered as a bear for about 15 years until one day she came across her own son, Arcas, who was hunting. Not knowing that the bear was his mother, he was just about to kill it when Jupiter stepped in and averted the crime by turning the mother and son into the constellations Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. To continue our discussion of the injustice of the gods and its connection with Artemis, we'll talk a bit about the play Hippolytus. This was a play by Euripides, written in the 5th century BC, and, like most of the plays of that era, used mythology as a springboard for having larger discussions about human society. The plot's not particularly complicated, as most Greek plays had more or less simple storylines. In this play, the young man Hippolytus is a devotee of Artemis and refuses to engage in sexuality. He thinks women are icky. But that might be fine for mortals, but he takes it a bit too far and openly disrespects Aphrodite, whom Hippolytus finds repulsive because of her association with love and sex. To get even with him for his lack of respect, Aphrodite makes his stepmother fall in love with him, with tragic consequences. I mentioned it before, but it's worth noting again that although all gods are dangerous and might kill humans for even small offenses, Aphrodite seems particularly dangerous. She doesn't really kill people. She ruins their lives and takes away their pride. She breaks entire families and sows generations of problems. So, always be wary of offending Aphrodite. Anyway, some of the themes I like to talk about when we cover this play are the arrogance of righteousness, the humanness of sin, and the injustice of the man and God relationship. There are a number of passages that allow us to talk about this idea, but this one is particularly useful. In this passage, Hippolytus is telling his father, Theseus, that he did not rape his stepmother. A true statement, and one that he certainly should have made, but as always in this play, he takes things too far. He can't just say that he didn't do it, but he says that there's no man who is more virtuous than I. He won't even have friends who don't strive for moral perfection. And that's the problem. It's not that he's sinless, which of course he isn't. It's that his striving for moral perfection has made him arrogant about his own righteousness. Today, we would call this self-righteous, and it's generally a bad thing. The broader idea here is that in pushing ourselves toward perfection, we come to despise all of those who are less. And since we never actually become perfect, we really just become blind to our own flaws. In this passage, the nurse is trying to convince Phaedra that having an affair with her stepson isn't really as bad as it seems. There are a number of things we could say about this passage, but maybe the most useful at the moment is that she's portraying a typical 5th century Greek value, that of balance. Now, the Greeks certainly thought that step-parents shouldn't be having sex with their step-children, but the larger idea here is that the quest for perfection is a fool's errand. If we push ourselves too hard, we're really trying to elevate ourselves beyond the human station, that is, engaging in hubris. We're humans. We're flesh and blood, mortal and weak, and a certain amount of sin is beyond our control. The key is to have balance. Be good when you can, but don't beat yourself up for your flaws. In short, be human. In these passages, we see the central problem of humans in the Greco-Roman mythological system. We can never escape the gods. By worshipping one, you might be offending another. Think of the women who suffer punishment by Hera because they were raped by Zeus. There's no justice for humans, just the whim of the gods. Here, Aphrodite seeks punishment against Hippolytus. She doesn't just kill him, which would be punishment enough. Instead, she infects Phaedra with an unrighteous lust, leads the maid to take part in the crime, and then has Theseus reject his son's claim of innocence, which then leads to Hippolytus' death. She destroyed the entire family and their reputation for eternity, when it was really only Hippolytus who offended her. And Artemis' response really isn't any better. All she has to offer is vengeance against one of Aphrodite's favorites, who certainly will have done Artemis no harm, and which will certainly do Hippolytus no good. Thucydides wrote that the strong do what they will, while the weak accept what they must. Greek mythology certainly agrees. The gods are strong, and they do whatever they want. We humans are weak, and we have to just take whatever they give. This ends the lecture. Next, we'll take up the topic of Apollo.